Are you looking for ways to build wealth? Then you've come to the right place. I'm Julian McClurkin, the Chief Storyteller with Tribevest. In this 9-part masterclass, I sit down with Jim Pfeiffer, the founder of Left Field Investors. We talk about building wealth through passive investing in real estate. Here's chapter 2. Welcome back to the masterclass. We're now on to chapter 2, syndications. Jim, what is a syndication?
A syndication is basically just a pooling of capital to be able to go buy typically one, but maybe more properties. So it's typically a property that someone might not be able to purchase on their own. A good example is, let's say you want to buy a $20 million apartment building. Well, most people don't have $20 million sitting in the bank that they can go buy this apartment building with, but you think, okay, I'll go to the bank and get a loan for 75%. So there's $15 million you're going to get from the bank. You still need another $5 million. Again, most people don't have $5 million sitting in their pocket to go buy these properties. So what they do is the syndicator, the operator, we'll talk about that more later, they get maybe, let's say, 100 people to each put in $50,000, and now you have your $5 million for the down payment. And that's, the syndication is the operation of running that apartment building now that you've bought it.
Yeah, but 100 people, that seems like a lot of people to get on the same page about an investment. How do you get that many people on the same page?
That's a good question, because what you do is they create an LLC, a limited liability company. That's just a way of owning something. And there's in an LLC, you can have general partners and limited partners. So the general partners are the operators, the syndicators, the people that are running and managing the deal. The limited partners are you and me. We're the investors. We're the ones giving them $50,000. We don't have any responsibilities after we give them that money. Now, when they operate, they have to do everything. They have to find the deal, they have to negotiate the deal, they have to sign all the documents and make sure that they get all the funding from us, the LPs, limited partners, and also the bank. So they have to do all of that, and then once they've closed the deal, they have to operate it, they have to communicate with the LPs, they have to send out reports to the LPs, hopefully they send distributions of cash to the LPs, and then they operate it. So they deal with what we talked about earlier, the tenants, termites, and toilets, right? They have to repair things and they manage the property. Another thing about syndications is it used to be really just reserved for the wealthy. But Congress passed the 2012 Jobs Act. There's a regulation in there called Regulation D. You don't need to jump into the weeds and read that at all, but it talks about 506B syndications and 506C syndications, and that's usually what we're dealing with.
What is the difference between the 506B, C, D, and F?
I can't talk about D, E, and F, just 506B and 506C. So there's two parts to each of those. One is what kind of investors they can allow into the deal, and the other is, are they allowed to advertise or not? And so the type of investors they're talking about, whether you're accredited or non-accredited. And accredited, they just broadened it, but accredited basically means you either have $1 million in assets outside of your home, or you earn, over the last couple of years, $200,000 or more if you're filing single, or $300,000 filing jointly. Now, there's also a couple little caveats. If you pass a few securities tests, you can also become an accredited investor. And all that means is the accredited investor has access to a lot more deals. Now, I found through using Tribevest, one of my tribes, we had a bunch of non-accredited investors. And that really got me out there looking for non-accredited deals. And they're out there, and they're just as good as the others. And I invest in both. So the only disadvantage to being non-accredited is you have a little bit less choice.
Understood. In the housing market, I'm an agent. When I am submitting offers, it seems that other agents rank different types of financing that comes through. You have the best, which is cash, then you have conventional, then you have FHA, then you have VA and USDA. It sounds like when you're going to purchase deals, it's better to be an accredited investor rather than a non-accredited. Or is it non-accredited?
Yep.
Yeah. But using platforms like Tribevest, like you said, you can become an accredited investor by using your whole team, or is it just a group of non-accredited investors now have access to something that normally only an accredited investor would have access to.
Yeah, the way that Tribevest helps is not really with the accreditation, because if if one person in your group is non-accredited, then your whole group is non-accredited.
If they're on the LLC?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
But what Tribevest allows you to do is, like I have a group I'll talk about later that we contribute $100 a month. So it's real small stakes, but you can get into these syndications. And so all these people in this group with me are non-accredited. So the investment opportunities out there, I didn't think were equal to what an accredited person could invest in. And
Right.
in fact, they're not. But there are plenty of syndicators who target the non-accredited groups and will let you in their deals. So it's not as big of a disadvantage as I originally thought. This used to be for the wealthy, and the wealthy still have some advantages, but the regular person can get in it too.
Got it. Okay, so let's assume that I have $50,000 to put into a syndication. Why not just go off and buy a single family home on my own?
A lot of people do start in active investing, doing wholesaling or buying single family homes, as we talked about in the last chapter. But the reason why you might want to put it into a syndication is because it's passive. You don't have to do anything. After you've decided on the investment, decided on the sponsor, all that stuff that we're going to talk about, then you turn over the operational duties to somebody else. Somebody professionally who is trained to do this and only this runs your real estate operation for you, right? I was investing in actively in my own stuff, and I thought, why don't I just have a professional do it? Because I have my regular job, and now I'm trying to manage a single family home on the side. It's much more effective to have somebody else do it professionally, and the returns, honestly, are not that much less than I was getting on the active stuff.
So how are the profit return splits different between the general partners and the limited partners?
So the general partners, sometimes they don't even put any money into the deal. A lot of them, you like to have them invest as LPs and be GPs at the same time. So general partner, limited partner. So they invest some of their money as limited partners. But the general partner, they're doing all the work. So, but we're providing all the money. So you have to split up the proceeds, right? So typically what they do is they usually, a lot of syndications offer a preferred return. A preferred return is also called a pref. And what that is basically, it's usually between 6 and 10%. And they say, okay, I'm going to pay you every month 7% out of cash flow from based on how the property is doing. So if one quarter they only pay you 4%, they have to make up the rest. And so at the end, when they're selling the property, that's when they make up. If they haven't paid that 7% consistently, the first thing they'll do is they'll make up that 7% and make the LPs whole, right, on our cash flows. Then they'll return all of the capital, so that's your initial $50,000 investment or whatever it is, and then everything else is split based on a predetermined amount. Usually it's 80-20, 70-30, 60-40, with the bulk of it going to the LPs. And that is all taken care of on the back end, if that makes sense.
No, it does. So they're guaranteed a certain amount.
There's no guarantees.
Okay.
And if you ever, this is a great question. If you ever get an operator offering you a guarantee, you say thank you, no thank you, and you exit, because they can't guarantee anything. That's it's, I don't know if it's against the law necessarily, but they should not be guaranteeing you returns. What a preferred return is, it means that you get paid, the LP gets paid before the GP gets anything. So if the deal goes south and there's only 5% returns on this, the GP gets nothing. So it's basically they're paid for their performance, but to get you to invest, they want to say, hey, I'm going to make sure you get 7% as we go through the investment. Now, it's not guaranteed. It might not get 7%, but when they sell the asset, that's when they backfill and pay you for anything that they had missed.
So in the syndication, who typically gets more, a limited partner or a general partner?
Well, the limited partner will get more cash, but they also put in more cash, where the GP didn't put anything in. They put it in on the LP side, but they're not putting anything in other than their sweat equity, right? So they're not putting anything in. The other thing to look for is the transaction and operational fees. So the GP also gets paid for that. There's acquisition fees, perhaps, disposition fees. So they might get 1% of the total value of the property when they buy it. And that's just so they can do all their due diligence and cover all of their expenses. And then there could be other fees. There's an asset management fee usually of 2 to 3% that's paid annually because they're managing that asset. And so there's other fees that you have to look for when you're investing. But the typical ones are acquisition, which is when you buy it, disposition, when you sell it, and then the ongoing is the asset management fee.
There's fees for each of those levels, is what you're saying? Acquisitions fee, dispositions fee, and then management fee?
Asset management fee, that's the one that's recurring. The others are typically one-time fees. You buy it, you pay them they get 1% of the total purchase price, and that's for all the work that they're doing up front, and then they get same percent, usually 1% on the back end, because they're not getting the cash flow as you go, and that's what they need the asset management fee, because they manage the whole property. They usually hire a property manager, so that's a separate fee, but that's not paid to the general partners. The general partners get an asset management fee.
Okay, so if I want to invest in this syndication, which I kind of do with this $50,000, what's the process?
Well, for the LP, all the active stuff is up front. You have to do your due diligence, and we'll talk about all of this coming up in later chapters, but you need to vet the sponsor, decide on a market, pick the asset class, and then vet the deal, right? So there's a lot of upfront stuff. After that, you're not really doing anything. But left field investors, the community that I'm part of, there's tools that we have will help you along the way. So one of the most important parts is vetting the sponsor, which we'll go into detail later. But left field investors has a sponsor screener tool that helps the new investor come up with the questions to ask when you're talking to the sponsor for the first time. And so that's part of it. You have to screen the sponsor. Then you have to pick the market, like I said, screen the deal. And for the deal, we also at Left Field Investors, we have a deal analyzer, which basically, we'll talk about it a little bit later, takes some metrics, you put those metrics in, and you make sure the deal kind of checks all the boxes. We don't want to re-underwrite the deal. That's what the sponsor should be doing for us. But we do want to check and make sure that it hits all the right numbers that we're looking at. After you analyze the deal, then you're going to get a bunch of documents from the sponsor, the GP.
What are these documents?
Yeah, so you get the private placement memorandum. They call it the PPM. It's 100, 200 pages with all the things that can go wrong. It's all for the lawyers. The lawyers write it, the lawyers read it.
Yeah.
I recommend when you get into a deal with a new sponsor, you read it, you look at it, and you're not going to read every word. It's a lot. Nope. But there's ways, and we talk about that. Part of the community aspect of this is people know, hey, look for this, look for that in the PPM. And that's one of the things you need to do. There's also an operating agreement for the LLC, because each property that you buy is going to have its own LLC. So you want to check out the operating agreement. And then there's subscription agreements that you have to sign. And that's where the operator is getting information about you. How are you investing? As an individual or as an LLC? They need your social security number and your address, your phone, all the private information. After that, you send the wire, and then you just wait for the cash to roll in. After you've invested, you've sent your wire, money's coming in, then you'll get monthly or quarterly distribution checks and reports. So you need to read those, and you'll find out how your property's doing. And then around March 15th, tax time, you'll get a K-1. And that's a specific document that lays out how the taxes are paid. And we'll talk about that later. But you have to be on the lookout for the K-1. And the next thing you do is you wait around for the next year, and eventually the deal sells, and then you collect your capital and the appreciation.
Nice. That concludes Chapter 2. We're going to move on to Chapter 3.